Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. I am Haley, founder and CEO of WOTE, aka the Women of All Terrain. In episode 1, we talked about all things metabolism. We broke down what it is, what things impact it, like our hormones and lean body mass, and how understanding what your TDEE or total daily energy expenditure is really going to be the foundation of understanding how to achieve long-term and sustainable results. We explained how to calculate your total daily energy expenditure so you can start to see the external progress that you're looking for without having to live in a subscribed box, end yo-yo dieting, and finally build your body up and focus on building that positive relationship with nutrition and fitness along the way. So if you haven't gone and listened to episode 1, I highly recommend just backtracking and starting there. But today we are going to move into the next phase. We're going to talk about how to reverse diet. And this is really where we're going to take that groundwork that we laid with our metabolism and start to build upon that. We're going to talk about rebuilding, refocusing, and making sure that we are avoiding tanking our body along the way. So in this episode, we're going to break down why reverse dieting is so critical, how to implement it, and how this piece, when it is done appropriately, is really going to be that sweet spot to make sure that we are building our body up and not breaking it down. Let's start at the top with understanding why reverse dieting is so important. If we're in a chronic dieting phase, it can be a hyper stressful state on the body. There's kind of 3 main negative pieces that happen if we're continually in that dieting phase. So one of the first things that can happen, which is not great, is that our metabolism can become suppressed. So if you're in a place right now where you feel like you haven't changed anything, you're still eating the same way, but you're all of a sudden hitting a plateau, or maybe starting to go the other way, seeing negative impacts on your body composition or having your weight go up, one of the things that can happen is our total daily energy expenditure after chronic dieting or over like a continual long-term yo-yo process is that our total daily energy expenditure can start to adapt or suppress. And the studies have shown that that kind of top end number can start to diminish by upwards of 600 calories. And so you could be eating the same way, training the same way, but your energy demands are no longer the same. Your body is starting to turn down the dial on your metabolism or lower it, slower it, however you want to look at it. So that's one thing that can happen. We want to avoid that so we don't have to feel like as we age, we need to continually eat less. That is not fun for anyone. The other thing that starts to happen is not only is our total daily energy expenditure impacted, but so are our hormones, things like our thyroid function and our leptins. That's going to be our hunger hormone that signals that we are full and satiated and satisfied. They start to become dysregulated. And so our body starts to send us these mismatched cues that make it really difficult to actually adhere to an appropriate calorie deficit to continue to see the results. So on one hand, our total daily energy expenditure could have lowered. So our basal metabolic rate is starting to go down. Our non-exercise activity is starting to go down. We have less energy, so we're not going to want to move as more. We don't have as much to give during our workouts. So you can start to see that it's a ripple effect within our body in progress there. And then our body is trying to get us to eat more. So it's turning up the cravings, turning up our thoughts about food. So it's really difficult to be in that pattern of under eating. Then we start to eat the old way. We see that bigger swing, but our total daily energy expenditure has started to decrease and we can start to put on weight at a faster rate. Those 2 things can happen. And then the third thing is that we can start to lose muscle mass at a faster rate. We already naturally do that once we're continuing to age and as some other kind of lifestyle factors like a pregnancy or like the menopause transition, we're already signaling to our body to lose muscle mass. So what we want to do is make sure that we're not in a dieting phase for too long or too aggressively, or we're not in a dieting phase that is telling us that we shouldn't be strength training. So if you have followed a protocol that's like you're eating so little that you shouldn't move or strength train, that is a massive, massive red flag. And we're definitely going to see a lot of muscle mass loss along the process. But if we're in that chronic dieting place, that's something that can happen as well. That's going to impact our total daily energy expenditure, which we broke down in episode 1 as well. And so there's all these compounding factors that are going on if we are in an extreme calorie deficit, if we're there for way too long, or if we're continually going back to that because we haven't found that place of maintenance. So this is where reverse dieting comes into play. We need to be able to understand when to hit a pause or a stop on fat loss, build our body back up to avoid that metabolic suppression or that metabolic slowdown. What we're going to do there is basically give our body the signal to say, hey, you do have what you need. Let's go ahead and maintain the levels of muscle mass that we already have, continue to build, make sure that we're not having that total daily energy expenditure suppress, and really like pouring into your body for long-term success. And if you have a longer journey to go, this can be frustrating at first to seem like, okay, well, maybe I've lost the 20 to 30 pounds and I still have 10 or 15 to go, or I still want to see some composition change here. It's really about having that long-term trajectory. And so in episode 1, where I'm talking about kind of starting at the end, where do we want to go with like longevity and long-term health and overall health, and really nipping this yo-yo in the bud once and for all, it's understanding that sometimes we have to slow down to speed up. So we have to take a pause on a fat loss phase currently, go through this reverse dieting phase appropriately so that then down the line, we are building our total daily energy expenditure up, continuing to build lean body mass. And that's going to be where not only we build the composition that we're looking for, we're lean, we're strong, we're capable, we have energy, but we're also having the biofeedback response that we're looking for. We're not, feeling like we are really moody. We're not feeling like we're agitated and like we don't have the energy to get up and play with our kids or go hike and go hang out with our dogs, whatever the things that bring us joy. And we need to ensure that we can continue keeping these habits long-term so that this is something that is just becoming a way of life. That's where we unlock that conscious consumption, we maintain our results, and your cues start to actually work for you. And we're going to dive super deep into that in episode 3. There are a few main things that are happening as we're going through the reverse dieting process that are really important to lean into for long-term progress. The first is going to be making sure that we're getting back up to your true total daily energy expenditure and we're not staying in that adapted state. So we're building your body up, not going to a point of surplus or over-consuming, but making sure that we are filling your body to the full line and giving it what it needs so it has the fuel to then go and build strength. So this is going to be really that point in time where we are kind of pouring into our body so that we can continue to build strength, we can continue to perform in our workouts, and that's going to yield the external signal or give us more effectiveness from our workouts and the strength training that we're doing to be able to put on more lean body mass. And as we put on more lean body mass, we're going to start expending more energy in those workouts and when we're at rest, when we're sitting here listening to this podcast, when we're walking around doing all of our day-to-day things. So A, we're coming back up to our true maintenance. B, we're starting to build strength and muscle mass. And C, we are quieting that food noise. One of the biggest things that we're doing as we're starting to gradually increase our intake and be closer to metabolically even, or where your true total daily energy expenditure is quieting some of those food obsessive thoughts that can start to happen when we've been in a calorie deficit for too long, or quieting some of those cravings and blood sugar spikes if we've been in a point of overconsumption for too long and flip-flopping back and forth. So not only do we want to build muscle mass and give our body what it needs, not being too high, not being too low, we're living in the sweet spot, but we're also quieting that food noise so that we can start to enjoy the process and not feel like we're just constantly thinking about the next thing that we're going to put in our mouth. Now, if you're anything like me as you're listening, this can sound really great in theory, but there can be some fears that hold us back. I will be the first to admit that even after understanding the science and understanding like, yes, in theory, this sounds great, I do want to build my body up, there were a few main things that led me down an unsuccessful road in my first few attempts at the reverse diet. So just allow yourself to have some grace and honor some of those fears that are coming up. One of the first fears is really just having a bit of a fear of eating more food, whether it's like, oh, I don't know if I want to eat more food because it might cause weight gain. I don't know if I can eat more food because I'm already not hungry. And that's a sign that our metabolism can become or has become slightly adapted because our hunger cues are turning off. The only way to build that trustworthiness is to be able to get it what it needs. And so this is where we can start out really slow and understanding that as we go through the reverse diet process, we're just gradually kind of closing the gap on that calorie deficit. And this is why my personal philosophy is doing that in a slow and gradual increase instead of going straight back to your total daily energy expenditure if you have that fear of weight gain. Now, the thing is, we're not going back to overconsumption. We're getting to that total daily energy expenditure of being metabolically even. And the cool thing is, if we have been doing that appropriately with using tracking as a tool and gathering data that's usable, that gives us the ability to trust that we are in that place of being even and we're not going to put on any unwanted weight. The thing with the reverse diet and the thing with increasing your food intake is that it's going to be normal for the scale to shift slightly on the higher end. And I know that can be nerve-wracking, but you literally have more food and volume in your stomach. This is where taking progress photos or looking at non-scale victories is incredibly important, so you're not creating a story that progress is just disappearing from you. So you can expect around 1 to 3, 2 to 4 pounds gained once you get kind of up to that metabolic even, or where you're eating isocalorically neutral at your total daily energy expenditure. It doesn't mean that you are totally out of wash. It's just understanding that you have more food in your system. And if you're doing this alongside strength training, you are putting on more muscle mass. And so we're shifting that fat to muscle ratio. So the scale is not going to be the most important thing for you. So if you are scared of increasing your weight or having unwanted weight gain, making sure that we're looking at all of the other factors that are changing in a positive direction as well. The other fear I see often, or maybe not even a fear, but almost like a subconscious behavior that can happen as I have walked athletes and our coaches have walked athletes through reverse diets, is feeling like, okay, I'm not in a calorie deficit anymore, so let me do more. More is going to be better. As I'm increasing food, I'm going to need to train more. I'm going to need to train harder. I'm going to have to get more steps, do all of this. The thing is we've calculated your total daily energy expenditure based off of what's going on in all of those factors with your non-exercise activity, with your exercise activity, with the thermic effect of food there. We don't need to do more just because we're eating more. Then we're kind of chasing that energy balance. So trusting that the data that you have collected on yourself is usable and looking at kind of giving your body the signal to be at that appropriate fueled level. If we're constantly trying to strive to do more activity and more of those things, we're going to be living underneath that total daily energy expenditure continually, and our biofeedback is never going to optimize or allow us to feel as good as possible. The last fear that I see with women engaging in a reverse diet is almost like opening a can of worms when we increase intake, is a way of looking at it. Or like, if I have more food to have, I feel like I'm going to fill it with junk food, or I'm going to go off the deep end, or it's going to be really hard to still eat in alignment with my goals. And this is where it's really important in a calorie deficit or in a fat loss phase or in that initial data gathering piece, wherever you're at in your journey, to incorporate the foods that you do find enjoyment with. Because if we're always in that place of avoidance in that place or in the fat loss phase, then it's going to be really challenging to start to incorporate them once we have that higher caloric volume, because we've been in this state of avoidance for so long. So if we understand how to incorporate them in a fat loss phase successfully, break away from that perfectionistic mindset, which is what we help women with in our coaching program every single day, that's where we can be more successful in the reverse and really look at making small shifts. So that could just be starting to shift the portion of your protein in every meal. That could be adding one additional snack. It could be adding volume with micronutrients and having a higher amount of fruits and veggies. It could be adding a full fat version of something. So there's a lot of different ways of going about it. But if we're looking at the purpose as we increase is to make sure we're giving our body the fuel that it needs, we can start to find that balance of adding with high quality foods, but making sure that we're having the things that we enjoy along the way. So we're not getting in that black and white, all or nothing thought process that's really sticky with our relationship with food overall. Those are our main fears. It's totally fine to have that fear, but I encourage you to trust this process, understanding that long-term goal. Again, that was the challenge in episode 1, because some of these protocols can feel new or different, and they may challenge your previous beliefs with what you've done in the past. So I want you to understand that long game, how we're trying to build our body up. We might need to do things slightly differently. Understanding the value and what the reverse diet is giving us is going to help us build trust along the way and give us the ability to have grace with ourselves when we take a bit of a misstep. So let's dive into the nitty-gritty how-to process. If you have been taking the tools from episode 1 and been finding what your total daily energy expenditure is, maybe you have been in a calorie deficit. I'm assuming if you're about to go through a reverse, if that's the phase that you have been in, we're going to start with where you're at. So we're going to be logging our intake still with being in that calorie deficit. So if we use the example, let's say I was at 2,000 calories and I was losing a pound per week. I have calculated my total daily energy expenditure with that data to be closer to 2,500 since I was in that 500 calorie deficit per day. I would start with logging my intake at that 2,000 calories. And what I'm going to do is just start with making gradual shifts in increasing my caloric volume. Some people like to start with a 20% bump. Really depends on what that depth of your deficit is. If you have a longer, like 750,000 calorie deficit to go, sometimes that 20% bump in that initial piece can be really helpful, especially if you are struggling with low energy, poor recovery, or your hunger is starting to get a little out of control. That can be enough of a bigger kind of zhuzh to the system to allow you to want to adhere to those targets and kind of get out of a bit of that hole if you are feeling that way. If you don't have as long to go, or if you're noticing that you're already pretty full and you're a little more hesitant to increase your intake, this is where going slow with just about an 100 to 150 calorie bump can be really beneficial. And what we're going to do is we're going to increase your intake every week or every 2 weeks. You're going to be gathering data with how your body's responding, not only externally, what's going on with your body composition, what's going on with your rate of loss, but also what's going on with your biofeedback, what's going on with your hunger cues. Are you being consistent? That's going to help you make the decision to say, hey, should I continue bumping up this week? Should I sit here and stay here for another week? So it's totally up to you. There is not a one size fits all approach, but around every week to every 2 weeks, gradually increasing by around 100 calories, 150 calories until you're at that calculated total daily energy expenditure. Now, you're not a robot and you may have been strength training alongside this. I hope you have been. And if you have, then you have the ability to be building lean body mass alongside this. So your total daily energy expenditure could have increased slightly. So instead of just going to that calculated amount, let's call it 2,500 in my example, and just stopping there, this is where taking a peek at the data to see what your true total daily energy expenditure in that time is. Because if I'm still maintaining my weight, or if I'm hovering around that half a pound is gained, and then it's like tapering off for a little bit, I can continually increase that intake until I hit that level where my body is maintaining. If we're tipping the scales of like, okay, we're hitting around that 3 to 4 pounds gained and we're seeing it come, continually go up, it just means we're over consuming. So just dial it back a little bit. That's where you're going to find that sweet spot on what that true isocalorically even amount is for you in that exact phase of your journey. So that's where data is really important as we are increasing your intake, so that you are right in the sweet spot and you're giving your body all of the fuel it needs to be able to prioritize long-term health, prioritize muscle mass, and really deposit into your body's 401k. As you're going through this reverse diet process, continue to strength train. We want to look at least around 3 times a week with an appropriate strength training protocol that is following a progressive overload. You're looking at having more food in your system. And so instead of saying, I need to train completely differently, this is just the opportunity to do more with the energy and power that you have. So it's like, this is where you may be able to increase how much you're lifting easier as opposed to when you're in a calorie deficit. So like I said earlier, more is not better. You don't need to completely go crazy and change what you're doing on the workout side of things. Just continue prioritizing strength training and give yourself grace. There is not a linear process here, and there are gonna be random weeks here and there. Like I said, we are not robots, that it may feel that your body throws you some curveballs. It could be a higher stress week. You could be on your cycle. Maybe you were traveling, maybe you went out to eat and there's higher sodium levels. So don't let kind of blips in data be able to tell you, oh my gosh, this reverse is totally not working. Look at what's happening consistently over time. You can pause being able to increase that intake until your body kind of settles for a second and then continue on that path. So allow yourself a little grace and the ability to look at data with curiosity instead of judgment and fear as you're in this process. You may be thinking that this process sounds great, but when are you going to stop increasing? Or what happens after a reverse diet? Or maybe you are in that place where you know that this is what you need to do. You know you need to hit that pause on fat loss, but what happens after? Like, how long should you be in that phase? All of the what if questions there. So again, it's really hard to answer that in a one size fits all approach because everyone's bodies and journeys are slightly different. But if we're looking at kind of the natural and most normal phasing of nutrition, we can go through that appropriate fat loss phase. Again, not wanting to be there any longer for around that 3 to 4 month time frame, or when we start to see some signs of adaptation that our body is asking to come out of that fat loss phase, then we're going to start that gradual increasing those calories by around 100 and 150 until we're at that metabolic maintenance. Then we're going to stay there for a little bit. You can't just get there and be there for a week and then be like, I'm ready for fat loss again. We haven't given our body enough time to rebuild itself and be ready to successfully go back into that phase without getting straight back into adaptation. And then we'd be in that yo-yo cycle that you'd been in the past anyways. So from when we start that increase up until when we're at that maintenance, we want to look for around a 1-to-1 ratio. So if you were in a deficit for 3 months, we're going to want to rebuild and maintain up at your total daily energy expenditure for at least 3 months. Don't try to skip or rush this step. You are going to do more of a disservice to yourself later by doing that. So I'd rather you stay there for a little bit longer, but starting to understand that 1-to-1 ratio. Then if it's appropriate, you can go into a secondary fat loss phase. The cool thing is you have the ability to build your total daily energy expenditure higher. So getting into that 500 calorie deficit may not be as difficult. You may not have to go as low if your body has put on more lean body mass and we've started to get out of that adapted state. Or you could also be in a place where you don't need to go into a deficit again. This sometimes can be kind of confusing or challenging. Like, do I just stay here for good? And that's really what we're going to dive really deep into in episode 3, is talking about long-term maintenance, not only from a habitual standpoint, but also how we can take all of the knowledge that we have gotten from episode 1, understanding the basics of our metabolism. In this episode 2, how to come out of a fat loss phase, reverse diet, rebuild our body back up. And then in episode 3, we're going to start to talk about what we do long term and how to build conscious consumption, start to trust our body's cues so we're not at war, and it becomes so much easier to actually trust, like, is this a true hunger signal? What happens with stress? Or do I know kind of how to naturally eat the appropriate amount in a variety of different scenarios? So that's where we're going to get to long term, because if we're going to maintain our new level of leanness or the composition that we have been looking for, we have to be able to maintain the results that we have cultivated for around 8 months. That's going to be where we establish our new weight set point. So episode 3, we're going to talk a lot about that long-term maintenance and how we can get to that point of food freedom consistently over time while also maintaining the external results. So I hope you have found this episode to be useful. The reverse diet can bring a lot of excitement. It can bring a lot of fear. Like I shared, it was something that I had avoided for a long time. So if this is a place that you either have questions on when it's time to appropriately do the reverse diet, is this something that your body is showing signs of now? How long should you be in it for? All the implementation pieces, that's exactly what we do in our coaching program with Finding Fire. It's not just about fat loss. It's not just about that initial phase. It's about coming out appropriately too, and doing it in a way that supports you, allows you to feel good, and build trust not only in the process, but with your body too. So if you have interest in joining our coaching program by listening to this podcast, you get 10% off. Go ahead and book a phone call with someone on my team and just mention podcast 10 so you can get 10% off of that coaching program. If you forget podcast 10, just say, hey, I listened to the podcast, and they can go ahead and give you that discount code on that call. But it starts with a conversation. We need to understand what your dieting history has been, what you've been doing over the last couple months and years, and that's how we can start to move forward. I look forward to seeing you guys in episode 3, where we can talk about the long run.